Hey guys, welcome to my lecture. I hope you're all prepared and have your pencils ready. By the way, this is the best video about Israel and Palestine you will find on YouTube. There is good news for you already. By the end of this video, you will have your own opinion on that topic. Yes, after so many years, you will finally figure it out. So, Arab-Israeli conflict or Israeli-Palestinian conflict, who is right, who is wrong, let's explore it together. So we will start with the history, like what was before Israel and Palestine and who created them. Then we continue with the first war that is called War of Independence. After that we will talk about the Six-Day War and that is followed by the third war, Yom Kippur War, and finally we'll discuss the modern days of Israel and Palestine and many funny facts along the way. This is the best part. Alright, let's begin our journey. The territory of modern-day Israel and Palestine was a part of Ottoman Empire, Turkey from 1517 to 1917, which is 400 years. Exactly 400 years. It's not like there was Palestine or Jordan or Syria or Israel with today's borders, and then Turks came and conquered them all. Rather, it was an area populated by random Arab communities who consider themselves primarily Arabs, not Syrians, Jordanians, or whatever. And before the Turkish Empire, this particular region was ruled by other kingdoms, just for reference. You can Google it. Also, it's worth mentioning that there was almost a Jewish presence in Jerusalem in small numbers, but Jews did live there continuously. But it also doesn't matter, guys, okay? What matters is that Israel and Palestine didn't exist as independent states before the Ottoman rule, and they remained part of it for the next 400 years. Alright, I can hear the question in the audience, but what happened next? Turkish Empire completely collapsed after World War I, and its Arab provinces were divided between the victorious countries, Britain and France. You lose the war, you lose the control over your colonial lands. Sounds reasonable to me? The fate of Middle East was in the British-French hands. The green color represents the French mandates that turned into Syria and Lebanon, and the red areas show the British mandates that turned into Iraq and mandate for Palestine. But what countries did the mandate for Palestine develop into? In 1920, the League of Nations, future United Nations, gave Britain the mandate for Palestine with the explicit task of creating a Jewish national home. The word mandate means authority. Britain was given authority to create Israel. Britain was given a task, okay? I repeat, the task was to create a Jewish national home. Not a Palestinian one, not a Spanish one, but a Jewish one. Okay, so what did Britain do first? 2 years later, Britain decided to create Transjordan, an Arab country which is today simply called Jordan. This decision was approved by the League of Nations. Um, Jews were not allowed to settle in Transjordan. This is what I call a cell division, if you guys remember biology classes. I mean, Britain could do it. They could draw any borders they wanted, and they did. It was literally their territory. They sliced the mandate and created a new Arab state. By the way, Mandate for Palestine is a really confusing name because it's originally just a geographical area, but then it became a country. Imagine it's called Mandate for Holy Land or Mandate for Middle East. Then it would be clearer for you. Also, as you can see, Israel's creation was planned long before the Second World War. Just saying. Alright, so that's it. This is how it ended. Israel was created. Well, not really. 17 years later, in May 1939, Britain issued a white paper policy that restricted Jewish immigration to 75,000 for 5 years, after which any further immigration would require the consent of the Arab majority. In other words, Jewish immigration stops, because Arabs wouldn't allow it, obviously. Jews were blocked from buying land in 95% of the mandate territory, according to this new policy. Even though Jews rejected it, the policy was still enforced. Basically, Britain said, screw it, we aren't going to create Israel anymore. Britain gave up on its duty. From 1939 up to Israel's independence in 1948, Britain actively tried to block illegal Jewish immigration to Palestine, even as Jews were fleeing Nazi persecution. The British Royal Navy patrolled the Mediterranean Sea and intercepted many ships attempting to bring Jews to Palestine without authorization. Even though at that time World War II was underway and Britain was fighting Germany, a serious enemy, Britain still paid attention to the Jews. Responsible gentlemen. Um, there were incidents including violence. One was the famous case of the Exodus ship. The British boarded the Exodus, resulting in a violent struggle in which 3 people were killed and many injured. The Holocaust survivors were sent back to camps behind barbed wire in Lübeck, Germany, where in some cases they were served or guarded by German personnel who had previously been involved in Nazi structures. No comments on that. Uh, it's funny because the Second World War ended and you might think that Britain could chill and relax, but no. Britain was determined to stop Jews from coming to their future home. Alright, now we've come to the end stage of cell division. In 1947, this final plan was suggested by the United Nations, not Britain, because it had given up on its task, as I just mentioned earlier. So the United Nations created a new Arab state, Palestine, and at last a Jewish state. Hooray! The green area was supposed to be Israel and dark orange sand area Palestine, and the pink area in the middle Jerusalem, and around Jerusalem was meant to be an international zone. Just by looking at this map, you can clearly see that only a twisted mind could come up with such borders. Honestly, even a mentally ill person would draw better lines than that. It's like, tell me you want 2 countries to start a war without telling me. Also, if you look closely in here, I wish you could zoom in. Oh, thank you. Much better. You can see that Jaffa is colored in dark orange, which is a port city and a Palestinian land. By the way, I don't know how to pronounce it properly, don't get mad. Which basically means that if Arabs wanted to invade Israel, they could do it from the sea as well. So, World War II is over. Millions of Jews have been killed. The world, saddened, grieved, and shocked by the genocide of the Jews, decided to create a home for them. Yes, by further dividing their territory into 2 parts. Perhaps it was assumed that since there were fewer Jews left in the world, they didn't need so much land. I don't know, I can only guess. And the green area on top is 20 kilometers in width, meaning Arabs didn't even need to invade Israel, they could just place their artillery um, along the border and start shooting. Also, the big part at the bottom is a desert and almost nobody lives there. But personally, I understand why Arab countries decided to go to war with Israel. It's like you just need to put some effort and Israel will be gone forever as if it was never there. The temptation was strong. Alright, Jews accepted this pathetic plan, but Palestine and other countries like Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq rejected it. The plan passed with the required 2/3 majority. Guess what happened next? Yes, you guessed it right, but let's first talk about demographics. After the end of World War I, 1918, many Muslims were expelled or forced to migrate from the former territories of the Ottoman Empire, namely Bulgaria, Northern Caucasus, it's Russia actually, Greece, Romania, Yugoslavia. Numbers may be different though. Most of these people fled to Turkey. Turkey wasn't in the best shape and was overwhelmed, so it tried to send some of these people to other areas like Palestine. However, many Muslims moved to Palestine, Israel of their own free will. But why? Starting from 1918, the Jewish sector of Palestine's economy experienced rapid growth due to Jewish immigration. Jews were arriving to Israel, Palestine, with their money, creating significant employment opportunities. Many Arabs migrated to Palestine in search of better jobs life, basically like Gastarbeiter. So here you can see non-Jews means Muslims. Well, there were Christians as well, but mostly Muslims, of course. In 1947, there were over 1 million of Muslims and 600,000 Jews. Why only 600,000 instead of 6 million? Well, because of one famous painter, and also Britain that interfered with Jewish immigration in every possible way. I don't know how Britain got away with it, probably because it won the war. Um, I'm telling you this because people always say that Arabs lived there for centuries and that it was their motherland where their parents and grandparents and so on lived. But as you can see, half of them moved there as immigrants basically. The population couldn't have doubled from 600,000 in 1918 to 1.3 million in 1947 just naturally. Alright, now we are ready to move on. The War of Independence. Who went to war against Israel? Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. Saudi Arabia and Yemen contributed small numbers of troops as well. Palestine is not on the list because it didn't declare independence and therefore didn't technically exist. The war actually started a year earlier in 47 between Jews and local Palestinian Arabs. The second and the main part of the war began on the second day of Israel's independence. Israel declared independence, and the next day the Arab countries invaded it. Israel had 28 times fewer people than Egypt and Jordan combined, and I didn't even include other Arab countries. By the way, Jordan and Egypt were the strongest Arab countries militarily at that time. This is why I listed them in this specific order. Jordan first, Egypt second. Regarding the weapons, who supplied whom? Only Czechoslovakia sold some weapons to Israel, the rest was mainly self-manufactured. Arab armies had mostly British weapons. The Jordanian Arab Legion was led by British officers. I have to say that this war, the first war, was indeed between Jews and Arabs, with no third parties involved. The US didn't sell anything to anyone because it had a weapons embargo. It's just some people think that America was helping Israel from the beginning of Israel's creation, including me. I was brainwashed as well. Alright, let's see what Arab leaders had in mind before that war. The partition line proposed shall be nothing but a line of fire and blood. It will be a war of extermination and momentous massacre, which will be spoken of like the Mongolian massacre and the Crusades. We will have to initiate total war, and we will murder, wreck, and ruin everything standing in our way, be it English, American, or Jewish. Thank you guys for expressing your emotions. Now let's see the results of the war. Israel lost roughly 6,000 people, which is 1% of its total population at that time. Arabs lost around 10,000 people. Uh, a funny fact, in January 1949, last days of war, Israeli forces entered Sinai. Here on the map, here they entered Sinai, Egyptian territory at that time, in an effort to encircle and trap the retreating Egyptian army. Concerned about the situation, Britain sent 5 aircraft to that area. Israel mistakenly identified them as hostile and shot them down. Israel later apologized. It's hilarious. So, when the war was coming to an end and it was already clear that Israel would win, Britain became worried and sent its planes immediately. But nobody sent any planes to Israel when Arab countries invaded it. Hmm. Okay, let's continue. Alright, consequences. So, before and after the war. The dark blue color is Israel, the dark pink area is what Israel managed to conquer. You can see Gaza became quite small, and now there is access to Jerusalem. It's not isolated anymore. Nevertheless, some folks were skeptical about invading Israel. One of them is this guy. If Arabs lose, it would lead to such a loss of reputation that the Arab governments would never be able to recover. This is because I doubt in the unity of the Arab armies and their ability to fight together. If the war is lost, it's the Palestinians who will suffer, not the Arab states. Thank you for your wise words. That's actually what happened. Because this map doesn't show all the changes, my friends. We'll have to move to the next slide to see the rest. After the war, from 1948 to 1967, Gaza was occupied by Egypt and West Bank was occupied and later annexed by Jordan. Yes, you heard me right. The rest of Palestinian land was taken by its Arab brothers, which leads to the conclusion that Palestine doesn't exist. I mean, it didn't declare independence when it had the chance, and after the war there was no Palestine left. Yeah, sorry, but what can I do? I'm simply telling you the history. But there is a good part. Two fighting sides gained land after the war. Israel increased its territory, Jordan expanded its territory, and Egypt got a small new colony. So everyone was a winner. It's a unique example in the history of mankind where everyone was happy with the outcome. Isn't it marvelous? It also shows that the Arab countries never had the intention of creating Palestine. Their goal was to destroy the Jewish homeland. Even if they had succeeded in removing Israel, they would have simply expanded their own territories and not created Palestine. Egypt didn't grant citizenship to Palestinian Arabs. People in Gaza weren't allowed to enter Egyptian territory, they were isolated. All Palestinians, including Palestinian refugees, in West Bank received Jordanian passports. Okay, so Jordan gave passports to these people in West Bank. Roughly 150,000 Palestinian Arabs remained, luckily for them, in Israel. All of them were granted Israeli citizenship. In 1952, the Arab League adopted a resolution that effectively prohibited Arab countries from granting citizenship to Palestinian refugees living in their territories. The intention was to preserve Palestinian identity. Oh, so thoughtful of them. In everyday language, you want to have full rights? Go back to Palestine and fight with Israel. We don't need you here. Let's dive deep into this refugee thing, shall we? There is a United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. It's the main international organization for refugees worldwide, founded in 1950. It has 20,000 employees, operates in 136 countries, has roughly 38 million active registered refugees. Its budget for 2024 was 10.7 billion. Why am I telling you this boring stuff? Well, because there's a special refugee agency dedicated for Palestinian refugees only. This is what makes it unique. This agency serves only one nationality, because Palestinians are obviously special. It has more than 30,000 employees working for them, which is more than the International Refugee Committee. It operates in 5 regions in contrast to 136 countries. It had 1.4 billion budget, which is not bad for one nation. So there is a worldwide entity for refugees across the globe, and there is a special one for Palestinians, not for Ukrainians, not for any other nations, but for Palestinians. Of course, why not? Okay, but what makes um, Palestinians different? A Palestinian refugee, according to that organization, people whose normal place of residence was Palestine during the period 1946 to 1948, and who lost both their homes and means of livelihood as a result of the 1948 conflict. Mm-hmm. Conflict, not a war. Okay. So from 46 to 48, so only 2 years. People who lived only 2 years in Palestine were considered refugees. Interesting. So if I move to Ukraine as a student with a student visa and stay there for 2 years and then the war began, would I be considered a refugee too? Hmm, I'm not sure about it. But it actually makes sense, guys. If you remember, many Muslims came to Palestine, Israel in search for a better job, better life. And if the requirement had been, say, 10 years, then the number of refugees would have been much lower. As I see it personally, this was deliberately done to make the problem bigger. Alright, that was point 1. Now let's read point 2. Descendants of male Palestinian refugees, including legally adopted children. So, refugee status is inherited. If your father was a peasant, then you'd be a peasant too. Why not? But honestly, I don't know how that was even allowed. So, if an Ukrainian woman came to Germany as a refugee, and then 1 year later she got pregnant and gave birth to a boy, then this child can't be a refugee anymore, okay, guys? He was born in Germany and never lived in Ukraine, never lost a home, alright? No organization has such rules except the Palestinian one. Anyway, as you can see, the number of Palestinian refugees is constantly growing. Today it's almost 6 million. And if you're watching this video in 2050, then you might have already 11 million of them. And in 200 years, the whole world would consist only of Palestinian refugees. The evolution path that we deserve. Okay, and the blue line on the chart is the number of refugees according to Israel and according to common sense. The initial number is also different, but it's not important here. The number must decrease over time because guess what? People die as they get older. So, did Jews commit and continue committing genocide against the Palestinians? Because the Palestinian population has already increased by 6 times. Hitler killed 6 million Jews in 4 years, but Israel somehow managed to do the opposite, growing the Palestinian population to 6 million. Wow, that's incredible. Also, those Palestinians who currently live in West Bank and Gaza are still counted as refugees. Yes, Palestinians living in what is now considered Palestine are officially classified as refugees and receive money from all sorts of organizations. Uh, don't ask me how it works, I'm just stating the facts here. Who works for such organization? Luckily, we have Peter Hansen, a Danish general of this Palestinian Refugee Union, who in 2004 publicly said in an interview, "Oh, I'm sure that there are Hamas members on the UNRWA payroll, and I don't see that as a crime. Hamas as a political organization does not mean that every member is a militant, and we do not do political vetting and exclude people from one persuasion as against another." End of quote. Such lovely people. Uh, you're a member of Hamas? Not a problem. We don't judge for political views. Thank you, Mr. Hansen. I appreciate it. Okay, guys. You might be screaming already, but they're innocent. They need help. What is your solution to the problem? Stop criticizing. Well, we can look and see how other countries did it back then. You know, they say that it's important to approach the issue from a historicist perspective. That means that we shouldn't judge the past by today's values and standards, but rather within the context of its own time. Then let's do it. The initial plan for Jewish home was created in 1920 after World War I, and final borders were drawn in 47, which is after World War II. We have India and Pakistan, where 7 million of Muslims moved from India to Pakistan, and 7 million Hindus moved from Pakistan to India. We have Turkey and Greece, where a lot of Christian Greeks were forced to move from Turkey to Greece, and roughly 500,000 of Muslims were expelled from Greece to Turkey. And obviously, a lot of killing was happening along the way. I mean, a lot of genocide. I hope you all know that. So it wasn't just moving, it was much worse. In Germany, roughly 12 millions were expelled from East Germany. Also, around 15,000 of them were killed along the way. In Italy, before the war, regions Istria and parts of Dalmatia were part of Italy. After the war, due to border changes, these territories became part of Yugoslavia. As a result, roughly 350,000 Italians were forced to leave their homes and move to Italy. Nobody considers them refugees. No special refugee organization was founded for these people. None of them received a single dollar from United Nations or so. My solution: remove all Muslims from Israel to Arab countries and remove all Jews from Arab countries to Israel. Well, this was implemented by one side only, the Arab side. Sorry, it's not my solution, it's Arab solution. Let's see how they did it. Okay, you can see, I don't know, Egypt had 75,000 Jews, Libya had 38, Morocco had 265,000 Jews. I mean, you can pause and read it on your own, guys. So, as of 2024, number of Jews living in Israel 7.4 million. Arabs living in Israel, basically Palestinians, 2.1 million, which is not a small number. I mean, it's 21% of the total population of Israel. As you can see, nobody expelled them from their land, from their motherland. And actually, if Israel decides to kick these 1.1 million Arabs out of its country, It has all the rights to do it, and no one should complain, because Arab countries already did it, but Israel is too kind, I guess. Now there is 4,000 Jews in all Arab countries combined, which is practically zero. And here is the table that shows top countries with the Jewish population. Again, I must repeat that not a single Jewish person who left the Arab world is considered a refugee now or back then. Some of them probably lived in Egypt, Libya for centuries and then were forced to go away. No special refugee entity was formed for these Jews. I know some of you will say that these Jews left Arab countries willingly. Well, you're right, but with some nuances. From 1950 in Iraq, Jews could emigrate, but only if they permanently renounced Iraqi citizenship, surrendered all property, homes, business, bank accounts to the state, signed a pledge never to return. They were permitted to take only $200 per person. In Yemen, Jews had to pay ransom, often their entire life savings, just to get permission to leave. They were basically treated like hostages. In some regions, Torah, it's a Jewish Bible, was taken away or held for ransom. If you wanted to take Torah with you, you had to pay for it. Israel used planes to transport its people from Yemen, basically to save them. Yeah, it's called Operation Magic Carpet. You can read about it. The value of Jewish property and assets left behind is between 1 and 2.5 billion dollars at that time, which would be tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars in today's terms. Alright, moving on. The Six-Day War. Who went to war against Israel? Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq sent its troops as well. Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries contributed to a smaller extent. You can read the population yourself. Also, you can you can pause and read it, guys. In terms of troops and weapons, Israel had 2 to 3 times less than the Arab coalition. The USSR was the main supplier of tanks, aircraft, and weapons to Arabs starting from 1955. Israel bought planes from France, anti-aircraft guns from Germany, and since 1962, America sold anti-aircraft missile system. It's important to note that America sold surface-to-air missile system, not gave it for free. And it was basically only that, nothing more from the US. This information is for those who think that the US was the main supplier of weapons to Israel. Israel either bought everything for money or manufactured it itself. One more thing, guys. The main enemy and initiator behind this war was the Soviet Union, I have to tell you. Starting in 1955, the Soviet Union began supplying Arab countries with weapons, primarily Egypt and Syria, through Czechoslovakia, which was back then a Soviet satellite state, essentially a puppet state. The USSR was preparing the Arab countries for that conflict for a long time. Okay, let's see what was the Arab mood before this war. The Arab people will not be embarrassed to declare, we shall not be satisfied except by the final obliteration of Israel from the map of the Middle East. The firm resolve of the Arab people is to wipe Israel off the map. The Jews of Palestine will have to leave. Any of the old Palestine Jewish population who survive may stay, but it is my impression that none of them will survive. Again, thank you very much for your words. Now let's see how the war started. Egyptian President Nasser ordered the UN peacekeepers, these guys with the blue helmets, to leave Sinai. The UN complied and withdrew its troops. So, these blue helmets were stationed along the Egyptian-Israeli border since 1957 with the purpose of maintaining peace. That's why they're called peacekeeping units. And then they just followed Egypt's command and left, opening the way for Egypt to invade Israel. Like, what's the point? So they stayed there for almost 10 years, and when they were needed most, they just left. Okay. Egypt then moved its own military forces into Sinai, close to the Israeli border. Syria also mobilized its troops and positioned them near the Golan Heights, close to northern Israel. Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran, a narrow sea passage to the Red Sea, to Israeli ships. This was a serious threat to Israel's economy and considered an act of war by Israel. Because of that, Israel launched a preemptive airstrike, destroying much of Egypt's plains and securing area superiority. By doing so, Israel made the first move in starting the war. But what is really interesting is that around 7 to 8 hours after the start of the war, the Soviet Union contacted Israel and demanded that Israel stop its military operations. The USSR had been preparing Egypt for that war for so long, and yet, once the war began, the Soviets demanded an immediate ceasefire. But why? Well, because this preemptive airstrike was so successful that it quickly became clear that the Arab side would lose. The USSR was politically embarrassed and strategically concerned about losing influence in the Middle East. So Israel had to hurry. Consequences, okay? So in just 6 days, Israel achieved a decisive military victory and captured significant territories. Um, Sinai and Gaza from Egypt. Okay, this is Sinai, this is Gaza. Sinai, Gaza from Egypt. West Bank from Jordan, and Golan Heights from Syria. Israel had to move quickly to capture the Golan Heights because the Soviet Union was screaming and pressuring for an immediate ceasefire. The Golan Heights are strategically important mountains that provide a military advantage. That, that is why Israel had to hurry. After the war, the UN condemned Israel's occupation of territories through UN Security Council resolution. UN called for Israel's withdrawal from the territories in exchange for peace. Yeah, nothing new from this United Nations organization. Okay, so Israel lost around 500 soldiers, 46 planes. Arabs lost about 20,000 people, more than 1,000 tanks. I mean, you can read it. Um, Israel captured 5,000 of Arab prisoners of war, including high-ranking officers, and later exchanged them for 20-30 Israeli soldiers. After the Six-Day War in 1967, 8 Arab countries met at a summit, which resulted in the famous Three No's resolution. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with it. The Soviet Union resumed and significantly increased its military support to Egypt, supplying it with new tanks, planes, and other military hardware. So the Arab countries didn't lose much. I mean, when you have such a generous friend giving you new, more modern weapons, you quickly forget about your recent failures. And as you can see, wars in Israel are very short lived. 400 planes were destroyed in just 6 days. Even though the number of people who died was relatively small, that doesn't mean that the war wasn't serious. This is because Israel's territory is so tiny that it can't afford to retreat and regroup. Israel is forced to strike first, otherwise, it risks losing everything. This was basically the most important part of the video. You don't have to watch the rest, but if you're really smart and motivated, then you're welcome. A new war didn't take long to start. Yom Kippur War. This was the hardest war for Israel, by the way. Who went to war against Israel? Egypt, Syria, our two old friends, Other countries like Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Libya, Cuba contributed as well. But the main force, main enemy behind the war, and the one before it was the Soviet Union. Just like in Vietnam and Korea, this war was fueled by Soviet support and initiative. That's why some people even call it the Soviet Israeli War. I mean, just look at the number of tanks and planes the USSR gave to Egypt and Syria. 4,000 tanks, 1,000 planes, and let's not even count in artillery and other important weapons and equipment. The Soviet Union spent billions of dollars on the war. Obviously, the Arab countries couldn't afford all of it. They were poor then, just like now. So they got it all for free. And that's why I think this war and the Six-Day War would have never happened if the Soviet Union hadn't supplied so much military equipment and support. Alright, Israel had something else. A special weapon is a nuclear weapon, of course. How did Israel create one? Well, they say that Israel and France helped each other to create a nuclear bomb. It's a long story. Before starting with the war, we need to understand the Egypt's motive. What was Egypt's plan? Back then, the president of Egypt was Sadat. He wanted to leave the Soviet influence and come to the American side, but he didn't want to be an American puppet that followed its master's orders, as it was with USSR. Instead, he aimed to present Egypt as a strong country that had hurt Israel badly and could punch it again if needed. He had no intention of liberating territories under Israeli occupation or freeing Palestine. Let Israel return Sinai to us, Egyptians, under American guarantees, and in return, we would sign a peace treaty and recognize Israel as a state. In short, that's essentially what happened. Alright, moving on. Escalation during the war. On the third day of this war, Israel placed 13 ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads on operational alert and informed the United States about it. In other words, Israel was ready to launch its nuclear weapons. Weapons of mass destruction. Did Israel go crazy? Why did it do it? Well, the war was going very badly for Israel in the first 2 days. Egypt had successfully invaded Sinai, Syria was advancing in the Golan Heights, threatening northern Israel. Heavy losses in tanks and aircraft left Israel vulnerable. That's why it was a signal to the US and perhaps the Soviets that Israel was in existential danger and needed immediate resupply help. If we have to go, we won't go alone. America received the message and eventually helped, but I'm gonna tell you later how exactly it did it. Now let's read what happened next. As the war turned in Israel's favor, especially in mid to late October, the USSR grew concerned about Israel's nuclear alert and the possibility of Egypt suffering a total defeat. Soviet ship carrying nuclear weapons was moved towards the Mediterranean near Alexandria. The Soviets also reportedly transferred Scud missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads to Egypt. On October 24, with the war nearing its end, the Soviets threatened to send troops to protect Egypt. The US received intelligence that the USSR was indeed preparing to intervene militarily to save Egypt's encircled Third Army. In response, President Nixon ordered the US military to go into high alert mode on October 24. This included activating American strategic nuclear forces worldwide. So things got really serious. But everything ended without any nuclear escalation, of course. Uh, Israel halted its advance, and the war ended on the next day. This led to peace between Egypt and Israel in 1979, where Egypt recognizes the state of Israel and Israel returns the entire Sinai to Egypt with oil reserves in it. The full withdrawal took place gradually over the next 3 years. Israeli towns were evacuated by Israel itself. US provided military and economic aid to both Egypt and Israel. Continues today, by the way. But Egypt wasn't the only enemy. The second biggest enemy was Syria. Israel managed to counterattack and not only push Syrian troops back, but also cross into Syrian territory, advancing toward Damascus. Later, Israel agreed to pull back from the additional Syrian land it had entered during the war, and later a buffer zone was established between Syria and Israel. Now let's come back to see how exactly the US helped Israel during this war. So, the distance between two countries is huge. Events were developing very quickly. Every hour counted. You had to help immediately, not a month later. You can't simply send planes from one point to another. They need to be refueled, which means they need a place to stop somewhere. Yeah, I know you might say this is Europe and an American friend, plus they are NATO members, and come on, NATO is controlled by America. What could be the issue? The issue was very serious, I have to say. All European countries and NATO members refused to allow US military aircraft to land or even fly over their territory, all except Portugal. Yes, European countries didn't allow America to use its land as a stopover for airplanes. Why? Because at that time, two-thirds of the oil that Europe consumed came from the Arab world. And Arab countries made it very clear, if you guys want to keep getting oil, you'd better not help Israel. So yeah, money was a big factor. The first planes arrived on October 14. Ships were also used to deliver supplies, of course, but they arrived only after the war had ended. Ships carried twice as much as airplanes. So, the results of the war. Israel won, but it wasn't an easy victory. As I said earlier, Israel agreed to return Sinai to Egypt. The rest stayed the same. Um, so return Sinai to Egypt on the condition that Egypt recognize Israel and stop trying to attack it. By the way, if you ask any Egyptian about the war, he will tell you that Egypt won. As you can see, the war ended in 73, and only 6 years later, in 79, Israel decided to give Sinai back. Maybe it was a mistake, to be honest. Alright, guys, now the big wars are done, and we will talk about more modern events. Why no Arab country wants to accept Palestinians? Why don't Arab countries help their Palestinian brothers? Let's find out together. This is why I'm here. This is why you're here. After the Six-Day War, Israel kicked out Jordanian forces from West Bank. Okay, there is no Palestine, there is Jordan. Roughly 200,000 Palestinians, together with PLO and Fatah, relocated to Jordan, somewhere in that pink circle here. PLO stands for Palestinian Liberation Organization, basically militants, people with guns. These Palestinian terrorists would launch attacks on Israel, of course, but they also began creating a state within a state. They ignored Jordanian law, set up checkpoints, and even hijacked planes. The famous accident took place on September 1970, where 4 planes were hijacked on the same day, Boeing from Frankfurt to Amman, from Zurich to Amman, and 2 other planes. Obviously, Jordan didn't like it that people were doing anything they wanted. Things escalated when that Palestinian organization tried to overthrow Jordanian king, which led to a war between Jordan and the Palestinians. Actually, Syria was also involved. Syria was on Palestinian side. It's a long story. Anyway, Jordan managed to win, and after that, what did Jordan do? It kicked out all these Palestinians from its territory. Understandable. Where did this Palestinian entity go? Here on the map, I put a red arrow. Um, they moved to southern Lebanon and started doing the same what they did in Jordan. Namely, they created a state within a state. Their goal was also the same, to launch attacks on Israel, and they also got into a fight with local Muslims and Christians, causing a huge civil war. It's worth mentioning that Lebanon was considered one of the most prosperous and developed countries in the Middle East before Palestinians came and caused the civil war in 75. It was even called Switzerland of the Middle East. You can look it up, there are many nice photos of developed Lebanon. But because of its Arab brothers, Lebanon got completely destroyed and now there is nothing but ruins left. The result of that chaos: 140,000 people killed, 630,000 of Christian refugees, and 160,000 Muslim refugees who left the country. Yes, there were many Christians in Lebanon before that. After all, Israel invaded Lebanon to stop this nonsense and pushed that Palestinian organization out of the country. In 82, PLO fled to Tunisia. Okay, now there is another example. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Let's go quickly. During the occupation, PLO leader Afarat, along with local Palestinians, openly supported Iraqi invasion. 1 year later, US kicked Iraq out and freed Kuwait. After that, Kuwait expelled around 350 Palestinians, which was 18% of the population of Kuwait back then. Which is understandable. We were living in peace, and when Iraq invaded us, you, Palestinians, supported the enemy. Now we don't want you in our country anymore. So, to sum up, Palestinians were in Jordan and tried to overthrow the government. Then they moved to Lebanon and destroyed everything in there. And in Kuwait, they went over to the enemy side. These are the reasons why many Arab countries don't give citizenship to Palestinians. Even today, Palestinians living in Arab countries still have limited civil rights and they are barred from many professions. In my opinion, Egypt and Jordan, with financial support from the Soviet Union, I must add, were the ones who shaped Palestinian nationalism and fueled hostility toward Israel to undermine it. But eventually the Palestinians became uncontrollable, turned against the Arab regimes themselves. In other simple words, Arab countries intentionally created a monster, brainwashed it with the hate toward Israel to make Israel's life hard. However, the monster got out of control and became a problem for the Arabs themselves. This is why nobody wants to accept Palestinian refugees. Alright, moving on. Free Palestine, free Palestine. We all heard it many times. But wait, is Palestine under occupation? Well, Gaza was free and still free technically. Israel has been occupying Gaza and West Bank after the Six-Day War since 1967. Unfortunately, for some reason, Israel decided to create Palestine for the second time in the history of humanity. Israel signed Oslo agreements which established Palestinian Authority in both Gaza and West Bank. The Palestinian Authority was supposed to gradually take control of Palestine until a final peace deal was found, which never happened. Israel began withdrawing from parts of Gaza and the West Bank, handing over civil administration to the Palestinian Authority. So, according to this agreement, they divided West Bank to three areas, as you can see. Area A, which is 18%, is under full Palestinian control. Area B is under Palestinian civil control, but with shared Israeli-Palestinian security control. And finally, Area C is under full Israeli control, which is 60% of the total West Bank territory. In Gaza, the situation was different. I'm just gonna go directly to the year 2005, when Israel completely left Gaza. So Gaza got keys to its new apartment, basically, and became finally free. Hooray, it's a miracle! 1 year later, Hamas wins the elections in Gaza. After winning elections in 2006, Hamas violently expelled Fatah from Gaza in 2007, splitting Palestinian governance. West Bank ruled by the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, Gaza ruled by Hamas. Now let's see how exactly Israel left Gaza and took its people with it. It's called Israeli disengagement, Gaza pullout. Israeli soldiers are forcibly carrying away their own Israeli citizens from Gaza. Something you won't see from the news. So that's it. Israel got peace in return. A number of rockets fired at Israel from Gaza. Here in 2005, Israel left Gaza and Gaza became free. The graph is self-explanatory, I hope. It's kind of funny. Palestine was granted independence for the second time, and it failed again. Also, you all remember that Hamas attacked Israel in 23 and Israel responded by invading Gaza. I personally don't understand why Israel reacted only to the attack in October and not earlier. I mean, weren't all those rockets attacks over the past 20 years enough? Israel had been enduring them for 20 years, and only after the Hamas invasion did it decide to act. Israel has been facing a wide range of attacks in its creation. I mean, I hope you know it: rockets, missiles, suicide bombings, shootings, stabbing, car rammings. So, does Israel consider leaving West Bank after that? Does Israel expect to have peace in return? Oh yeah, is Israel the most targeted country? By attacks per capita, yes. By total attacks, no. By complexity of threats, yes. It's just some funny statistics I found. Okay, do Palestinians want to live in Palestine? Yeah, I know it's a silly question. In 2000, a survey was conducted by the Israeli Arab newspaper among 1,000 residents of al-Fam city. They were asked whether they would agree to their city becoming part of a future Palestinian state. The results showed that 83% opposed the idea, only 11% supported it, and 6% had no opinion. Most of those who opposed it said they prefer the democratic system and better quality of life in Israel. Here you can see this city, al-Fahim, and they said, okay guys, we'll just make this new border and you will be in West Bank in Palestine. Oh yeah. But 83% said no. I don't know why. I don't know. Apparently, they like living under terrible Israeli government. Free Palestine. Which one from whom? Gaza is controlled by Hamas. West Bank is under Fatah. Hamas and Fatah do not recognize each other's authority in practice, and their relationship is adversarial. So Palestine is not even united. Two parts, Gaza and West Bank, don't recognize each other, and you want to free them from whom exactly? Hezbollah is another terroristic organization based in the southern Lebanon that attacks Israel from the north. Even if all Jews left Israel, Hamas, Fatah, and Hezbollah would immediately start fighting, and Syria would likely join the fight as well. The last state to be formed in that territory would be Palestine. It's my opinion. Iran was one of the friendliest countries toward Israel in the Middle East until Islamic Revolution. Iran supported Israel with oil during the Arab boycott. They shared intelligence and weapons. Israel helped Iran with agricultural development. Wait, why are we talking about Iran? What's going on? Well, now we are getting closer to the modern days, and Iran became a key player in that region. Uh, okay, just some history. Islam is divided mainly into two branches, Sunni and Shia. Iran is a Shia majority country where people speak Farsi, Persian language, while most Arab states are Sunni majority where people speak Arabic. Christianity is split into Orthodox and I don't know, Protestants. It's the same basically in Islam. Iran feels surrounded by enemies. Iran uses a network of proxy groups and militias to destabilize regions and thus weaken its rivals. That way, it avoids direct confrontation. Um, Here it's the same map, but it's outdated, I have to say, so be careful. Israel kicked Hezbollah's and Hamas asses. Iran has lost some influence in Lebanon and Syria. Also, as I'm recording this video, the USA and Israel have just bombed Iran on June 22nd, 2025. So I guess Iran is much, much weaker. So let me just quickly show you the map of Syria. You can read it on your own. Just one note. Assad's regime fell, HTC took over, Russian and Iranian presence significantly reduced, Turkey gained strong influence instead. Why am I telling you all this? Because I want to show you that the Middle East is extremely unstable. There are no clear and static borders. Many military groups are constantly fighting each other. But they are united in one thing. They all hate Israel. That's why when you hear news that Israel bombs or invades Lebanon, Syria, it does it to push militant groups away from its borders, to protect itself. When Israel strikes Lebanon, it strikes Hezbollah primarily. I mean, yes, it strikes Lebanon because Hezbollah is living on Lebanon's land. What else do you want Israel to do? Invade Syria, then Iraq, and finally attack Iran? It's nonsense. Proxy wars are very annoying because there is no one big army that you can defeat and then live in peace. Alright, we are done with our lecture. Congratulations, you've made it. Now let's review what we've learned so far. This is how it all started. The partition plan was proposed in 47, but before it could even be put into action, war broke out, which completely changed the borders, and Palestine was no longer part of them. However, the Arabs didn't stop there. After receiving military help from the Soviets, they attacked again in 67, and as a result, Israel significantly increased in size. Even that wasn't the end. The Arabs couldn't get over it, and the Soviets couldn't stop sending them weapons. So in 73, they attacked once more, for the third time already, and lost again. After that, in 79, Israel made a deal to return the Sinai to Egypt, hoping to put an end to further aggression. And that actually worked. Hold on, that's not the whole story. Something is missing. The creation of Palestine is missing. Oh yes, here it is. In 95, Israel granted autonomy to 40% of the West Bank and in 2005 gave full control over Gaza to the Palestinians. Israel created Palestine. As we can see, not Jordan, not Egypt, not any other Arab country, Israel did it. After all, Israel created this autonomy, so if Palestine doesn't behave properly or play by the rules, Israel has the right to take it away. How it started, how it ended, looks good, I like it. Conclusion. Palestine was meant to be created as an artificial country just to screw Israel. Palestine was betrayed by Egypt and Jordan and split between them. After that, Arabs used Palestinians as a political tool against Israel rather than helping them establish a state. Israel gave independence autonomy to Palestine out of kindness, essentially created Palestine. Nobody cares about Palestinians, not even the Arabs or Iran. Palestinians are a human shield, they are a convenient tool with one purpose to mess with Israel. If the USSR hadn't given billions of dollars to Arab countries in the form of tanks, planes, etc., the wars of 67 and 73 would have never happened, in my opinion. Palestinians are hostages of the situation. Unfortunately, they can't do much to stop Hamas or change things. But if you still hate Jews, guys, there is a workaround. Simply support Palestine so that your donations end up with Hamas, and Hamas will do the rest. Alright, thank you very much for watching this video lecture. I hope you learned something and now you have your own opinion on that topic. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, where you agree, where you disagree, and also I can make my PowerPoint presentation available for download if you're interested. Anyway, until next time.